studies, but I'm not sure we need them. We know this is true, right? There are so many studies that show that survivors of intimate partner violence are also criminalized because they were forced or coerced into participating in illegal activities by their abusive partners, because they defended themselves, and because they found themselves in places where the other people in their lives were encountering police. So this is Carla's story. Fearing retaliation from an ex-boyfriend, she agreed to store some of her belongings in his house while he was incarcerated. While perhaps a woman who hasn't been traumatized by a lifetime of abuse may have been able to take steps to remove the ex's belongings, Carla had good reason to believe she would be beaten and harassed by her ex after his release from prison if she got rid of his stuff. Fair. The police searched her house, treating her from the outset like a criminal and terrifying her children. They found only a scale and some bags in the ex's belongings. They also found a small bag they claimed was cocaine, but wasn't, and it was never tested. She was charged with possession, intent to sell, and criminal nuisance. Her face was plastered in the newspaper. Her kids were bullied at school. She was evicted from her home, and she was still afraid of her ex. At trial, the Ontario County DA's office rattled off a list of her exes, some dealers, others addicts, all Black men, claiming Carla's guilt was obvious. Just look at the company she keeps. She was ultimately found guilty of possession and faced at least a year in prison, away from her children and away from the kind of rehabilitation and therapy she really needed. The Geneva Women's Assembly organized to have people in the community write letters trying to make some of these arguments about how it is that survivors are routinely criminalized in this country because they're Black, because of their association with Black people. And I don't know, luckily, still unfortunately, she was able to fulfill her prison time on the weekends. So that's just one of the many examples of the ways gendered policing works in Geneva. I think we all know the story of Jack Montesanto, who strangled a woman while in his custody right here in the public safety building. Again, it is not a leap to recognize that the misogynistic culture of policing and the misogynistic culture of our entire society work to make that somehow possible, that a woman, while handcuffed, could also be strangled in the so-called public safety building. And finally, I know many of us are quite familiar now with the Geneva Believers chronicling of all of the police misconduct cases over the last 25 years in Geneva. Geneva Believer. But a close look at those cases reveal, right, some really troubling trends. They reveal domestic violence cases that are covered up when they make police look guilty, because they are. Mm-hmm. And they show the ways that harassing women, beating women, often single mothers, because of the alleged crimes of their children or partners, that's just regular life for GPD. So as we're thinking about all of the different ways that policing impacts our community, the other one I just wanted to talk about a little bit related to the work that GWA does are the parents, are the families who have family members who are incarcerated. And this impacts a huge number of people in our community. These are people who will spend their savings on private attorneys for their children or their spouses, who spend their weekends visiting one of the many correctional facilities that dot upstate New York, who are saving their money for the commissary or to send packages and holding down multiple jobs and caring for their families to do this. We know but the incarceration of men and women have intergenerational consequences that prolong cycles of abuse, addiction, family separation, and incarceration. Here in Geneva, it's time to start talking about the damage that mass incarceration and racist and sexist policing do, not just to the victims of that abuse, that's important, but also to the entire network of people who work to support them, who love them, and are tired of being told that they and their families are criminals and criminals only. So it's this orientation, this recognizing that policing and mass incarceration are community problems that require community solutions and not policing solutions, that helped to inspire the exhibit that I think many of you got to see in the parking lot. So this exhibition is part of an exhibit that the Geneva Women's Assembly put up as a commemoration of the Attica uprising, and I'm really happy to be able to share a little piece of it today. I just want you to imagine there's 2 more boxes, some beautiful banners, and it's all set in the creepily white supremacist small town of Attica, New York, with, I don't know, it looks almost like a castle of penitentiary behind it. So we used, for our first visit to Attica 2 years ago, banners, clippings, and mounted images of the history of the 1971 Attica uprising. The exhibit situated the events leading up to the uprising in the context of the prison strikes, peaceful prison strikes, I will add for this group, that took place in New York State in the summer of 1971. The prisoners were protesting because they wanted an end to inhumane conditions. They wanted the brutality they encountered every day to stop. They wanted health care. They wanted guards that just spoke their own language. And they wanted the prison to stop relying on solitary confinement, a form of torture. The exhibit described how the Attica prisoners were able to, once the uprising began, organize food and security within the first 12 hours. These are people who were, right, just like us here, able to self-organize, able to imagine a different kind of future than the carceral one in which they were living, and fully capable of accomplishing it. But the state wouldn't let it stand. They sent in hundreds of armed men that killed indiscriminately inmates and guards, leading to the preventable death of 39 people. So it's that history that the second museum exhibit here builds from, right? One that says mass incarceration is always, right, just one of the many examples of how state violence is used to maintain social control. The second museum, the one in the parking lot here, builds from the idea that every town is Attica. Through images and stories and poems and testimony sent in from people in small towns and big cities all over New York State, the exhibit tries to tell the story of the relationship between present-day mass incarceration struggles in New York and the important history of Attica. It's our way of saying, in order to commemorate Attica, in order to commemorate the courage of those prisoners to fight for a better future, we also have to recognize all of the people in small towns, smaller than this one, big cities, and places like Geneva who are standing up and fighting back and saying, we want something better for our communities. Life is hard enough when you're poor, when you don't have childcare, when you don't have transportation, when you have a pile of legal fees. It's time to stop shaming people for their partners, for their addictions, for the choices they make, mass incarceration, just like policing, is a community problem that requires a community solution.
Yes, ma'am.
So these are just some of the many reasons I'm just so excited about the incredible movement in the street we have seen all summer here in Geneva, thanks to the people's peaceful protest. And why, even though I know, right, we've got lots of work to do. We've got to dismantle white supremacy. We have to smash patriarchy.
Yes.
We have to put an end to a system that puts profit over people. So a police accountability board, it's not going to do all those things, but it's a really important step on the path toward community control of our own communities.
Yes.
And one of the insights of the Police Accountability Board legislation put forward by the PPP that I just couldn't think is more important is that it recognizes that the people who are experts on policing, the people who are experts on mass incarceration, are the people who are impacted by it. That's people who are formerly incarcerated. That's people who have been criminalized by the police. And it's also their families, their grandmothers, their sisters, their mothers, their daughters, all of the women in Geneva who know perhaps better than anyone the profound impact that over-policing, racist, misogynist policing, and mass incarceration has on our community. It breaks it apart. We just have to look at this really beautiful event to see what's possible here. It's possible to feed people free food. It's possible to show people movies outside. It's possible to gather together in solidarity, in celebration, and in a dedication to a better future for our community.
Yes.
That thing is happening right here. We don't need any experts to tell us that.
Thank you.
COVID conscious, there we go. All right.
That's right.
Awesome. Give it up for Hannah.
Thank you.
And we will support you back, obviously. Community supporting community. Akin, you want to introduce the next one? I already got the mic. So next up, we have Professor Gale with a wonderful presentation.
Yes,
you're going to be talking about the history of this whole movement throughout American history. So give it up for Professor Gale.
Yes! Woo!
Yeah, come on, we can do better than that.
Hi everyone. First of all, thank you so much for asking me to do this. It's an honor and it's a pleasure. I've kind of tried to put some things together here so that hopefully it will make this very brief talk. I'm going to do like hundreds of years of history in like 20 minutes. But here we go. They asked me, the organizers asked me to sort of give a history of protests in America. And I came up with this idea of, well, how do I do that? So what I'm going to really do today is give you a quick overview and sort of mark some important mass protest movements. And then I'm going to really sort of circle back and focus on one, the Montgomery bus boycott of 1955-1956, which some historians, and I tend to agree with them, sort of consider that particular protest to be the jump start of the modern civil rights movement. So I came up with this title, The power of public protest. And then I realized it's PPP.
Yes. Woo!
PPP. And the three things that I want you to sort of to take away from this. The first, I don't know if you can read it there, is what is needed to have a successful, I don't know if that's the right word, movement, to achieve, this is better, to achieve what it is that we want, to the goals that we set out. You need perseverance. We need sustained commitment. Second thing, it takes sacrifice. And the third thing, it takes organization. And those are the three things that I want us to be thinking about while we sort of go through this very extensive history in a few minutes. Yeah, can everybody hear me?
Yes.
Yeah, everything is cool. All right, good. Okay, so protest, I have another note here. Protest is really part of the struggle for freedom. It's part of the struggle for freedom. And I was listening to Carriole, I think her name is, last night. She went through 14 years of struggle for justice, and it's just in the courts now. This is the kind of work that takes time. And if we're going to do the work, we have to be committed and recognize that it takes time. So, part of the struggle of freedom, for freedom to get justice, to live out the promise of freedom and citizenship that was given to or guaranteed to all of us. Well, at least some of us in 1776, and then ostensibly all of us in 1865, but that's another story. So I'm anchoring this struggle for freedom in a very long struggle. A struggle in the Americas anyway, that goes back to in the 1500s, when the Spanish and the Portuguese brought the first enslaved Africans to the Americas. And if I look at just the United States of America, and I want to take us back to 1619, when the first 20 African men and women enslaved, were brought into Jamestown. The struggle for freedom began then. Protest for freedom, for justice began then. Slide. Okay, so I think that I have tried to impress on everybody that it's a long struggle, a struggle that reaches back deep in our history. And you know, there were individual acts of resistance against being unfree, against being enslaved. But there were also mass protests at the very beginning. And those we talk about slave rebellions. Those were mass protests for freedom, for justice. Next one. So I'm now sort of going to move through, mark some of these very important mass protest movements. So you got slave rebellion, you had the abolitionist movement. The abolitionist sentiment, ideas, started in about the 1730s, really got going after the American Revolution, 1830s, it really sort of concretizes, becomes, gathers a lot of momentum. It's over by 1865, when emancipation, when you got the abolition of slavery. But slavery, so there's some things that are important about the abolitionist movement. The first thing is that it was interracial. Quakers, I think, and a couple other Roman Catholics, and also another Protestant, I guess, denomination. But slave resistance lay at the heart of the abolitionist movement. And that's something that I really think is important for us to understand. That it wasn't just free people, white folks, who were running this abolitionist movement, but indeed slave resistance, protest against unfreedom that lay at the heart of the abolitionist movement. And black community leaders, artists and writers were tremendously influential in the movement. Then we had moving forward, moving into the 1890s during the period of Jim Crow, when all the rights and the sort of advances that African Americans had made after emancipation in 1865, in a very short period, 1865 to 1877, when you had a period of Reconstruction. That was over quickly, and what followed it was what white supremacists call a period of redemption, where they, in their words, they were redeeming the South from these black hordes who were free, who had the right to vote, who were making economic and social advancement. And so they instituted a whole series of laws, Jim Crow laws. At that time, African American women in particular got together. Many of them, almost all of them from the middle class, and they had this idea of racial uplift, that the way for black folks to deal with this terrible scourge of discriminatory laws was to uplift the race. So that's the club movement. And then another mass protest movement of a different kind, but I think it was a mass protest movement, was the Great Migration, where African Americans protested with their feet, protested the conditions of Jim Crow, the racialized violence, the disfranchisement, the economic disfranchisement, and they picked up themselves and they left the South in droves, massive relocation, demographically relocation of African Americans from the South into mostly northern industrial cities, New York City being one, Chicago being another, Milwaukee being another. That was another kind of protest movement, blacks protesting white supremacy. There were several others along the way. There's in the 1930s, yeah, you're right there, great. Don't buy where you can't work, right? You know, in places like New York, Chicago, and other major cities where there was a large black community, white store owners would not employ African Americans except in very menial positions, janitors, domestic workers. And so African Americans got together and said, we're going to have a movement and don't buy where you can't work. If you're not going to hire you, stop buying there, a boycott. And it worked. So there's that. Then another one, the March on Washington movement. This is not the 1963 march, although it was the precursor to that, where A. Philip Randolph, a black labor leader, threatened to bring 100,000 black men to march on Washington to force President, who was the president? Roosevelt. No. 1940s? Yeah, I guess. I'm sorry. It flew out of my head. Force him to, what happened was that they were pressing for him to desegregate the military, to desegregate the federal government. What they got out of it, you know, they threatened him with this march. He got absolutely scared. My God, 100,000 black men in Washington. Okay, I'll make an executive order, and that's Executive Order 8802, which was the first prohibition against discrimination in war-related industries under contract to the federal agencies. In another, I don't know, 10, 12 years was when you got the desegregation of the military, but this was the precursor to that. And then you had the boycott, Montgomery bus boycott in the 1950s. I'll circle back to that. Then you had in the Black Power movement of the 1970s, militant movement, and then Black Lives Matter in the 2000s. And I have not done all of that, but that gives you an idea of the of how, you know, that protest has been a part of the DNA of folks in America who have felt disfranchised, and I'm using that term sort of very broadly, who have been marginalized from the mainstream of America. Okay, so are we ready to listen to a little bit of the Montgomery bus boycott?
Yes.
1955?
Yes.
Okay. Well, first of all, as I said to you, it's thought of as being what sort of the jump started the modern civil rights movement as we understand that. The boycott lasted for 13 months. 13 months. From December the 5th, 1955 to December the 20th, 1956. 381 days of boycotting public transportation in Montgomery, Alabama. And this is not like 2020 where everybody and their son and daughter have a car. There were very few cars, and people depended on public transportation to go to work and to go to wherever else they were going to. So to boycott that was quite a commitment. Okay, let me set the scene for you. It's Alabama, 1950s, white supremacy reigns, segregation, deeply segregated state. It's the capital of Alabama. It's a college town. As I said, segregation is the law of the land. Okay. Yeah. One of the events that jump-started the modern civil rights movement. It's a little repetitive, I'm sorry. Okay. Transportation critical. All right, we got that. All right. Now, what happens is that there is a city ordinance that says that that the buses have to be segregated. Okay, so that's what's going on there. Black folks are treated terribly on the buses, really badly. And in particularly after 1954, when Brown versus Board of Education, the Supreme Court issued a decision that forced the desegregation of the public elementary schools. There was a tremendous backlash around that, and black folks were worse treated than ever on those buses. Things like babies, a black woman would go on the bus and she put, this is a true story, she had 2 children, she put them on a seat while she tried to get the change. The bus driver just kind of drove off. The children tumbled into the aisles. That was one. Another time, all the helpers going to the white homes were on the bus early in the morning. It was in the winter. It was very cold. One of the helpers, the workers, asked the bus driver to turn up the heat. He just stopped the bus. He opened the front door. He opened the back door. Blasts of cold air came in. Everybody sat and said nothing because they could do nothing. That was another one. Another thing that these bus drivers would do is that they would, if you were black, you had to go to the front of the bus, pay, and then come out of the bus and enter the back to get a seat. They would have people would pay, they would be on their way out to enter the back of the bus, and they would drive off and leave them. And there was nothing that they could do. They felt pretty powerless. Until one day, and you all know this story. I think that we could go to the next thing. Oh, there is it. There are some people marching. This is 3 months in, February 1954. But now you all know the familiar story of Rosa Parks. This is where Rosa Parks comes into the story. Rosa Parks, secretary of the NAACP, a seamstress by profession. She had been very much involved in nonviolent training. She was on the bus, she was tired, she sat, she refused to, the conductor came, you all know the story. She refused to get up, she was arrested. Word went through the black community that this very respectable woman was arrested. In 2 days, phone calls were made, and the decision was, it is time to do a boycott now. And I've left out a little of the story, that's important. That, people had been complaining, and there were a group of women, and here it is, Hannah, the group of women, the Women's Political Caucus, a group of black women who had been documented all of the complaints, who had been sort of waiting until the public were ready to move, but they had laid plans in case there was going to be a boycott or some other action. Well, they went into action 2 days after, I think the boycott started on December the 5th. They circulated, and here I'm thinking of my neighbor, Jess, who put Akim in her car and drove him all through Geneva to deliver information about flyers. Well, that's exactly what Joanne Robinson, I think we have a couple, let's see. We'll come to a picture of her. She was a professor at the local college. There is Joanne Robinson. And she got a student. They mimeographed off all of these flyers, and she drove him around and around Montgomery, distributing these flyers to all the black homes so that people would know that the boycott was on. They planned to boycott for a day. 1 day. That's all they thought they could do. They did not think that the black community was going to stick together. It was too hard. People needed to go to work. It was cold. It was winter. I'm a black folk, so I can say it. We're not known to stick together through all kinds of crap. So, there was that. But they did. They did. And the boycott, 1 day, then they gathered. And this is when Martin Luther King comes into the picture. Martin Luther King did not plan this. The women called him and said, okay, you guys want to come in and, organize, help organize. And so it went from 1 day to 2 weeks to a month. They met to eventually 381 days. And they met all of the challenges that the PPP is meeting now. Once you challenge power, this is what you have to expect. They had a mayor who's very much like our mayor, who disappeared, who was conciliatory at times but got nothing done. They had a city commission who made all kinds of promises and then backed out all of the promises and decided gave all of the excuses for why desegregating the buses could not possibly work in Montgomery, Alabama, even though in Mobile, Alabama, it was being done. So they came up with, against this tremendous opposition. They were even arrested. I think that if we scroll down some more, I'm sorry, I'm kind of lost with where, these are just some pictures of what's going on there. Police watching blacks waiting at a dispatch station. The police were brought into it to kind of harass black folks. Yes. So they also had, like we do, they had what they called a city commission. They were all white supremacists. And in, I think it was February, they decided that they were going to have an inquiry into this boycott. These obstreperous black folks who are upsetting the community. And they actually arrested 115 of them and put them in jail, including Martin Luther King. As it turns out, they didn't have space for everybody in the jail. MLK was the only one who went to trial. And it sort of fizzled out into nothing, that part anyway. In the meantime, while this was going on, there was a court case that black folks decided that, you know what, we think that we can take this to court. And there were 3 other women who were involved who were also had major complaints against the bus company. Eventually, this sort of wound its way, went to the federal court in Montgomery, Alabama. They ruled in favor of the plaintiffs and said that it was illegal to segregate the buses. The city commission appealed. It eventually went to the United States Supreme Court, who upheld the decision of the lower court. The city commission still would not implement the U.S. Supreme Court's decision, and eventually they were served by the U.S. Marshals. I think it was on December the 19th. This is a year and a little bit after the boycott started, and they boarded the buses on December the 20th. Buses were desegregated. And even though legally they still had to face the Ku Klux Klan, who visited a reign of terror on these people. Eventually, well, you know, I hesitate to say that they got that under control, but that's that story. That's the story of the Montgomery bus boycott. I think I forgot to tell you about the violence. Martin Luther King's house was bombed. E.D. Nixon's house was bombed during this whole time. So when I thought of doing this, I wanted it to be something that we could take away, because we need to know that others have walked this path before us and faced tremendous challenges. From the very first, 1619, from they got on those ships and there were shipboard mutinies, because we do not want to be enslaved, because we are fighting for freedom, all the way to what we are doing here. It's a long line. We stand on the shoulders and on the backs of a lot of people, and they have given us courage, strength. I want to end by saying what, I think we could just scroll down to the end. I'll go through. There is a legislation, and then the last one. John Lewis. Democracy is not a state. It is an act. It is an act. And we have to be willing to act. And the acting costs. The acting costs. Perhaps this is what I have to deliver to you. My gift. Maybe if you're interested, we could just run through some of those pictures really quickly. If you go back, let's see. Yeah, here. African Americans boarding an integrated bus through the once forbidden front door. This is after the ruling. And we could go back one. We're kind of doing it back ways. Like,
We'll definitely show the
oops.
special.
Okay, can we go to the next slide? Police watching blacks waiting at a dispatch station. 2 white women sit in an otherwise empty bus during the boycott. A crowd of African Americans gather outside the Montgomery County Jail. This is when they arrested the 115 of them. This is Joanne Robinson. She is a hero of mine. Women's Political Caucus. A group of African Americans. I mean, this was tremendously organized. You need to understand that there are over 45,000 people taking these buses. And you need to understand that they organized over 350 private cars to pick people up at like 52 dispatch stations. The Women's Political Caucus organized that, okay? The power of women in the civil rights movement. The MIA, the Montgomery Improvement Association, which was the sort of MLK and E.D. Nixon, they were also tremendously involved. But you know what? It was the women who were the backbone of this thing. Yay, women. Yeah. There is Rosa, arrested and booked. Famous picture, I figured you would know her. Yeah. 3 months in, February 1956, walking to work. So guys, thank you so much. I hope that was helpful.
Yes, thank you. Woo!
Can I ask a question though?
Okay. Quick Q&A. Are you okay with that?
Any questions? Anybody got questions?
Yes, sir.
So what was the financial impact of all the lack
Oh
of
my
riders?
God! Thank you, Jim. Well, the bus company almost went bankrupt.
That was
Right?
a private company?
It was a private company, and so they nearly went bankrupt. But you know, it took a court order for them, the court's decision for them to desegregate the buses, and they would not. The city, black folks went to the city and said, "Okay, so you don't want us to, integrate these buses? Well, let us have our own bus system." They would not. The city would not give African Americans the license, whatever they needed to run bus
Because it would
system.
compete with the white-owned business.
Absolutely not. I mean, that was Ida B. Wells's thing. People got lynched because of that too. Black folks. Hi. Yes.
Oh, yeah,
Groups and walk together in groups when they went to work?
Absolutely did. They did. And a lot of these people were domestic workers, and their white employers couldn't do without them. So they also got in on the action, and they would go and help to pick up their workers so that they could come to work. But that brought a lot of tension and grief for those women who were the white women who were participating like that. Yeah. But yes. Any other questions?
Any more questions? Anybody? The floor is yours.
Professor Gale here.
Yeah.
You guys got anything. She's got the answer.
Follow
for
me
it.
down this way. Anybody? You sure? Here we go.
Hi, for our current issue at hand, what should the women of today be doing to help our cause?
Just exactly what we're doing. We're organizing. We are organizing, we're standing up as women, we're standing up as black folks, we're standing up as white folks, but we're standing for justice.
Yes, man.
Nobody leave. Nobody leave. We got a special premiere. Ask questions, but we got something for you.
Yes.
Yeah, don't you worry.
Don't be afraid to ask questions.
Going once. Going twice.
Taking
Get
no
those
further,
hands in the
hold
air.
your peace.
Everybody. All right, give it
All right.
up for
Make some
Professor
noise.
Kid.
Yeah, thank you.
Make some noise, man.
That was amazing.
Is that okay?
Yes,
Was
of
that
course.
amazing?
Yes.
I think it's really important. This is so. We were gonna show the 13th, but it is getting a little late. I mean, who wants to stay for the movie for the next hour and 2 hours? It's a little late. So we're gonna cut it short, but we are talking about rescheduling for this movie, 13th. But I think this was super important, and please don't leave because we do have a movie that we do want to show you. Am I breaking everything?
Video, no.
Oh, I'm sorry. I'm loud. That's why I get my face in the paper all the time. This history lesson just shows us that we keep repeating ourselves because either we don't listen and we don't remember our history, and also there are really important things that we need to learn to be successful. So the successes of the people in our past are the things we need to learn from and keep on capitalizing on those things that work. So the people that are opposed to what we are doing as the PPP are out there. They're going to be riding motorcycles tomorrow and claiming that they are not racist at all, or there are no racists among them. But as we discuss that online and in different forums, pictures start popping up of Confederate flags and people saying disparaging things towards the Black Lives Matter movement and in support of white supremacy and white patriots coming down to the Geneva lakefront. Also city councilors who are also beating that drum. Definitely not Laura Salamandra, thank you for coming. The only counselor down here to educate themselves on this issue, which is what the PPP has been doing all month. And I don't believe any counselor has really gone out of their way to educate themselves, besides Laura, to come down to all of our events. And we are the only organization that is really spearheading educating our community and getting people together to know about the issue and writing laws and getting together and doing the things that our city government should be doing. So we are following in big footsteps, and I think that's what I gathered tonight. It's a lot of pressure, but we are up to the challenge.
Yeah.
And something really came out today. I just want to thank local people that are just really on top of what's going on and scrolling through all the live streams and things. And one of our distinguished counselors at large, Mr. Galanese, I was on the phone with him, and he told me in my first conversation with him, Adam, I'll never blow, excuse me for the kids, I'll never blow smoke up your ass. He told me he'd get back to me the next day about a resolution. He never did, and I called him up and I said, you blew smoke up my ass. So I told him flat out. And so back then, when we were proposing the resolutions, he was saying a lot that he supported everything that we were doing, didn't vote yes for any of our resolutions, I don't think. And then when we called out, when a black woman in Geneva stated that she saw a Confederate flag and blew the whistle, and she was just like, I can't believe this is going on. These bikers, there's a Confederate flag going down 5 and 20. Everybody that I saw that was a part of that rally said, no, don't believe her, don't believe that black woman, she doesn't know what she's talking about. And more people, and lo and behold, this week, the picture of somebody wearing a Confederate flag came out. And other stories are also circulated. I know, it was right on his shirt. And then also, people were saying that it was a nice rally, everybody was saying positive things. But we have a video of our distinguished counselor at large with some of his comments during that rally, which he didn't realize he was on a
I'm ready.
So let's play the tape.
Yes.
And see how he's blowing smoke up all our butts.
Right. Hold on. I know this gonna be online, but I need to show this.
World premiere. it gets better. Don't worry.
Right.
I said that.
Hold on, hold on. There's more.
I said that.
I don't need to hear anything. My vote is no.
It gets better.
One more time, because there we go. That's him in all his glory.
Let's just drink that in for a second. That's great.
Oh.
That is your city councilor at large in Geneva. Saying that.
Shame.
Shame on him.
That's right.
That's crazy.
So this is what we're contending with. People that are saying things about the distinguished, and I want to thank HWS for that forum that they did.
Yes.
Educating the people of Geneva and our city council on what a police accountability board should be. Yet he wanted to shoot those people.
Mm-hmm.
That is crazy. That is ridiculous. And that is grounds for removal.
I agree.
The same thing with our city attorney and the mayor and the city manager who allowed this entire month to just wobble into a hearing on Wednesday, which was duly voted for and now is illegitimate.
Mm-hmm.
They allowed that to happen, and I can't imagine that it's not on purpose.
Right.
So this is what we're up against, and I'm very inspired by the history that Professor Gale and Hannah were able to give to us today, because it just reminds me that this is a long struggle, and we will be fighting this for a while. Didn't just end with that hearing, and that hearing is still going to happen. So please sign up, and we're going to tell them how we feel about it, and we're going to play this video for them.
Yes. 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 Get him.
And we are going to file ethics complaints, and we're going to post.
Yes.
Yeah, and we're going to post where you can find that ethics complaint form, and we want everybody to fill one out and say, I saw that, and that is grounds for removal.
Yes.
You should be gone, or however you feel, but I think he should be removed. But
I agree.
Ethics complaints need to be filed on what he said. So I encourage you all to do that. Sign up for public comment for Wednesday for the public hearing from 5 to 7. And you can sign up and repeat what you said during the city council meeting from 7 on.
Yes.
If anybody has any questions, that was the bombshell tonight. I think we're going to reschedule the 13 because I think we've absorbed enough right now. We'll come back and absorb some more. But I want to thank everyone. Does anybody have any other
Yes.
comments or questions?
Tomorrow, what time are we here?
Tomorrow.
Not really. Tomorrow we're here at 12 o'clock. Marching. We know last Saturday it was hot. It's gonna be hot. It's the summertime. But so come on out, march with us. Get to know what it is that we are doing. Educate yourself. What else do we have? That's it, really. Please look out for the rescheduling of the 13th. Come on out, support. We are not just squatters and people who don't have the balls, because we out here, and I'm coming for you.
Where are you, Kelly?
Where are you?
You got the balls to come down here.
Right, you don't. So come on out. I'm calling you out, boy. All right, anyways, thank you all for coming. Thank you for showing your support. Geneva is great. It will continue to be great, and we will push it forward. That's all I got to say. So, PP out. We out. We out. We out. Make sure you share our live. That's all I'm saying.